If you haven't read the first part of my story, you should check out part 1. For those of you who are already aware of what's going on, let me get to it. When my wife, Natalie, finally got back, she came in crying and wouldn't stop. She kept saying, You don't deserve this. We don't deserve this. You weren't supposed to overlap. I love you. I care about you. Your family. You shouldn't have overlapped. At this point, I was really confused. I comforted her, held her until she stopped crying. Then, when she finally settled, I asked, Love, you're not making any sense. Who is she? Are you referring to the entity? She told me that she doesn't have a name for it, and she has never actually seen her. Only others around her can sometimes see her. But she has always been described as someone who looks just like her, the same radiant smile and the same lovely green eyes. But when you screamed on the phone earlier, you knew that what I was seeing, didn't you? How? She looked at me and started crying again. I only kept it from you because I didn't want you to freak out, she said. It's alright, just tell me everything, I replied, pulling her close. Then she told me the story of the last person who overlapped, meaning he saw her and the entity at the same time. When Natalie was in high school, her family, namely her parents and 2 brothers, were used to seeing it, as I call it, for lack of a better word, around the house. She was always described as a smiling girl who would usually just be sipping on water. This occurrence only seemed to happen in her house, never at school or outside. Her parents, knowing the situation, would never allow her to bring any friends over for fear that they might freak out by what they see. But one day, upon her insistence and arguing that seeing it has never done anyone harm, her parents let her bring over a friend. Natalie and her friend Chris were working on some homework when Natalie decided to go down to the kitchen and grab some snacks. While she was coming back up, she heard Chris saying, Very funny, but you're weirding me out with that smile. Natalie stopped dead in her tracks, but it was too late. The door to her room was open, and she was in direct line of sight of Chris in the hallway. He turned to look at her, his face completely pale, as Natalie heard glass shattering. She was completely in shock. Chris was looking at them simultaneously. Staring wide-eyed in the corner of the room, she heard him say, What in the... Natalie ran towards her room, but the door suddenly slammed shut. She started banging on the door. Chris, don't look at her! Just don't! She screamed across the door, but silence. The door opened 5 minutes later, and she found him unconscious. After taking him to the hospital, they found out that Chris went blind. Doctors could not explain it, and when they asked Chris to describe the last thing he saw, he struggled for words. That grin, those eyes, black eyes, and her head, oh God, her head was tilted 90 degrees. I never thought such a beautiful face could be so twisted. She thinks the only reason I can still see is because the overlap happened over the phone, so I wasn't able to feel the full effect, whatever that means. I was surprised that another overlap like this hadn't occurred throughout her life. That's when Natalie told me that they said that she was harmless and will not actively try to overlap. So then I inquired about the they that she just mentioned. Well, when I was a kid, my great-grandparents knew something about this. They were very hush-hush about it, but apparently it had happened in my family once before. So it was clear then. We needed to go see her grandmother, who was the only one left that could provide us with any answers. Natalie called her mum and was told that they hadn't been in contact with their great-grandmother for the past 2 years. Ever since her husband died, she became depressed and asked not to be contacted and broke off all ties. She lived out in the country by herself, secluded from the rest of the world. It was going to be a 3-hour drive, so we decided to attempt to get some rest before our drive the next day. We barely got a few hours of sleep in. My wife woke me up this morning, telling me breakfast's ready as she walked downstairs. I noticed both of us must have missed our alarm since it was 11 AM already. The first thing I checked when I woke up was the bed, to make sure I wasn't seeing it. When I finally went downstairs, I nearly fell backwards when I saw my wife, sipping from a glass of orange juice, facing the kitchen entrance. "Geez, don't do that!" I snapped. She came rushing towards me. "Sorry," she mumbled. I walked over and gave her a hug. "It's alright, we are both on edge. We'll work through this." After a breakfast that neither of us had the appetite for, we hit the road to find some answers. As we were driving, my wife held my hand, and I felt safe once again. It was a strange sense of security, because even after the crazy events, it was bright and sunny outside, and I was peacefully driving away with my wife. She smiled at me. I smiled back, looking at her beautiful green eyes, while fighting internally to take the images of the twisted entity off of my mind. We remained quiet for most of our journey until we finally reached the house. The house was located deep off of a small highway on a narrow dirt road. There was an old van parked, but it didn't look like it had been driven for weeks. The house also looked like it had been abandoned for a while. My wife reached out and I held her hand. "Let's hope for the best and see what we find," I said. But before I could even open the door, my cell phone rang. The moment the first ringing sound broke the quiet air, my wife clutched my hand just a bit tighter. She was on edge, I could tell. I looked over at her, and she was smiling ever so slightly. I pulled out my phone and looked at the caller ID. It read Natalie. The grip of the hand that I was holding started getting tighter and tighter. I suddenly got the feeling I was not with my wife at all. Call it a gut feeling. I picked up the phone as I realized the person in my peripheral vision was changing their expression. The breathing also got heavier as I heard the neck starting to turn. With what little bravery I had left, I turned away, not daring to see that twisted face. "It's not me!" Natalie yelled from the phone. The instant her voice reached my ear, I felt the glass shattering sound and the burning pain on my hand that lasted for a split second. I recoiled in pain, responding, "I know, I think it's gone now." I looked over to see, and sure enough, she wasn't there anymore. I breathed, "Don't hang up and drive over here. We need to see this thing through." On her drive over, she explained how when she woke up, she was seemingly stuffed under the bed, as if someone knocked her out and slid her under the bed. When she woke up and realized that I wasn't there, she knew something was up and called immediately. At this point I was freaking out a lot. So many questions rushed to mind. It talked? It acted just like my wife? How was it holding my hand? How in the world did it get out of the house? Most importantly, how do I tell it apart from my wife? That's when I remembered the stinging pain and looked at my hand. There was a very clear "lucky" burned into my hand. While I waited for my wife to drive over, I started thinking. The entity said, "Breakfast's ready," and "sorry." And why in the world was it sipping orange juice? Is it evolving? Is it learning how to fool me? I wondered for a long time what all this meant, until my wife finally arrived at 5 p.m. It was getting dark, and I wanted to go find a motel and come back tomorrow. But my wife insisted that we at least check to see if someone even lives in the abandoned house. Before she got out of the car though, she took the cigarette lighter from her car and burned it on her hand. I got very upset when she did that, but she said it might help me tell them apart. At this point, any idea of rationalizing this fear sounded great. We went and knocked on the door as the doorbell seemed broken. "Did you hear that?" My wife looked at me terrified. "Hear what?" I wondered. "The scream. It sounds like someone is in pain." My instinct was to back out. I really wished I had. But before I could do anything, my wife was opening the door, leading me in. I held her hand, while keeping one foot in the door. I was all too familiar with the classic "door slams behind you in a creepy house" to walk in completely. Inside, everything was dusty and full of webs. It was also unnervingly dark. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I noticed that the house was completely thrashed, with strange symbols scratched into the walls and on the broken furniture in a shade of red. Just then, my wife started feeling lightheaded and began to fall. "I feel so dizzy," she mumbled. I immediately caught her as she passed out. Then, to my horror, as I looked up, I saw her in the hallway. I could barely make out her figure, but her finger was pointed at me, with her head tilted at that unnatural angle. I did not need to stand there until I saw the rest of her creepy figure. I immediately turned around while dragging my wife with me. The door behind us slammed shut, but luckily my foot was still in the door. I groaned in pain from the impact and lunged towards the barely open door and crashed outside with my wife. I looked back, wishing she was gone, but she was still walking towards us, very slowly and deliberately. The next moments are kind of hazy as I was full of adrenaline. I somehow managed to throw my wife in the car and get in. As I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw her. Her mouth was now wide open and she screamed. As I hit the accelerator, I heard what sounded like the windows of the house smashing. I drove half an hour to a small motel to rent a room for the night. At this point, my wife is asleep, and I have not slept at all. I dare not look away from her. And what does the message on my hand mean? Is it toying with me? Telling me I'm lucky my wife called to save me? Should I go into the house again with someone else? I typed up this update for you guys, and in a little bit she'll be up, and we'll decide what our next move is. Any suggestions are welcome.